cannabis has been used medically since the year 2800 BC by Emperor Shen Nung, the founder of Chinese medicine. Wounds sustained in battle were bandaged with cannabis leaves. In the oldest medical text still in existence, he recorded the use of cannabis for gout, malaria, and rheumatism. Cannabis was introduced to England by the clergyman Robert Burton. In 1621, his famous work, The Anatomy of Melancholy, recommended cannabis for the treatment of depression. The New English Dispensatory of 1764 recommended cannabis roots for inflammation, a remedy that was popular in Europe, where it was already regarded as highly valued medicine. The second half of the 1800s was the golden age for medical cannabis, appearing in over 100 Lancet papers in England, and on apothecary shelves across America and Europe and the rest of the world, including New Zealand, where the first commercial cannabis crops were cultivated by Catholic nuns. After 10 years wandering the wilds of Auckland and Hawke's Bay, Mother Mary Joseph Aubert and 4 faithful came to Wanganui in 1883. Maori canoes transported the nuns upriver to Jerusalem, where she founded the Daughters of Our Lady of Compassion. She soon established Maori schools in the region, as well as homes for orphans and the underprivileged, and later 2 hospitals in Wellington. A French-trained nurse, Mother Mary immediately began cultivating a herb garden with medicines that would finance her homes for foundlings. By the 1880s, Indian hemp resin was a popular domestic powder and drink in New Zealand, used by doctors, nurses, midwives, and vets. She prescribed it to herself and her nuns for menstrual pain. It was also used as an appetite stimulant, a treatment for neuralgia, asthma, tetanus, alcoholism, hysteria, and depression. It was during this period that Queen Victoria's personal physician, Sir Russell Reynolds, prescribed cannabis for the Queen's menstrual cramps. Reynolds wrote in the first issue of The Lancet, "Cannabis is one of the most valuable medicines we possess."
Queen Victoria, 7 children, she swore by cannabis. She said it was the most wonderful treatment for the pains and distress of childbirth. It was very popular in Britain until about the 1950s. And then as soon as it started being used for recreation rather than medicine, the government clamped down on it. We got rid of it in the UK as a medicine in 1971. And since then, we've been prosecuting people with chronic, debilitating illnesses who've got no other options but to grow cannabis or import it. We've been prosecuting them in a really cruel and unnatural way.
Cannabis is medicine, and the typical one relates to like pain management or multiple sclerosis is an issue. People have got issues around if they're suffering from cancer and they're having to engage with chemotherapy as an appetite stimulant and as an antiemetic or anti-nausea.
The effects is practically instantaneous. Within 1 or 2 minutes, you're feeling better already. So you don't need to smoke a great deal of it.
Of course, one of the intriguing things we've discovered in recent years is that the brain makes its own cannabis-like substance. The brain is actually full of receptors for cannabis, and that's why cannabis works. It goes in the brain and it just does what the natural substances do. And that raises all sorts of interesting questions. That's probably why cannabis works in conditions like spasticity and pain, because it puts into the brain what's missing in those conditions. People that need drugs to reduce suffering, like multiple sclerosis sufferers who get prison sentences for growing their own cannabis, suffer even more because of the criminalisation of their behaviour. I have patients. I have one person like he's a magistrate. He's got severe spasticity, untreated by other medicines. Desperate to use cannabis, but of course, if he uses cannabis as a magistrate, he'll lose his job. And I think the way the British and to some extent you have actually attacked these people, and we don't allow them now to say to use a defence that they needed to because they were ill. This last government in Britain took away the defence of illness for use deliberately to actually penalise cannabis users of any sort, and I'm really angry about that. think it's cruel.
In terms of something being undermined by the current regime, is this idea of cannabis as medicine. And there are presently around the world various developments in that regard, and it hasn't, again, it's been stymied by the laws and legislation in New Zealand, which of course are very much driven by politicians, and I think it's important to appreciate that a lot of the laws around prohibition are basically stimulated or maintained by politicians in the face of evidence to the contrary, and it's very important to appreciate that. And politicians will try and get a sense of what their constituencies are thinking, but of course at the same time they are feeding into those constituencies' views by promoting their own views around substance use.
Politicians have voted against a law change tonight that would allow cannabis to be used for specific medicinal purposes. The bill was tabled 7 years ago and has taken this long to come back before the House. Tova O'Brien reports.
The message was set in stone for these campaigners, but it wasn't loud enough. Parliament has scrapped a bill to legalise medicinal marijuana.
The ayes are 34, the noes are 86. The motion is not agreed to.
I am very disappointed my bill did not pass at least a select committee so that the community could have a say about the best medicines for them. This is an issue between doctors and their patients. MPs should not be interfering.
Those who say cannabis is their only option are also disappointed.
If I could get medication from my doctor that worked for me, then I'd just use it. But the medication I get from the doctor makes me really, really sick.
Medicinal cannabis is already used in 13 American states, Canada, Spain, Germany and the Netherlands. Here, the Green Party bill would have allowed doctors to prescribe cannabis for 22 approved illnesses, and eligible patients would have been given an ID card allowing them to grow, possess and consume marijuana. A stance ACT says is supported by science.
There's very good scientific evidence to show that some medical conditions are improved by the use of cannabis.
But most MPs don't buy into that and say the bill is too flawed and could lead to wider issues with the drug.
Making the leaf available is simply a backdoor way of making it more widely available to everyone. So no support.
The argument that this is a backdoor to legalisation is a strong one, but it's a concern that actually hasn't played out around the world. And it's clear that we need to separate the medicinal use from cannabis with the legal status of cannabis.
The Law Commission is currently holding a review of the Misuse of Drugs Act, and when those results come back, more changes are likely to be proposed, and Today will be rewriting the medicinal cannabis bill. Tova O'Brien, 3 News.
It's essential for me. If I haven't got cannabis, I'm dead. All right, within not very long after not having any cannabis, I'm going to be dead. Yeah. So that's the cannabis. I use it as a poultice on my leg for nerve damage. My whole body goes into spasms. Sellotape a bit of cannabis on there. It stops it straight away and I can go to sleep in about 20 minutes. Otherwise, I'm awake pretty much all night with it. The New Zealand Medical Association actually supports it. It's actually in the law, in the Misuse of Drugs Act, that the doctors can prescribe it. So if doctors prescribe it, and then we join up to Green Cross, then that's actually complying with the law. And it even complies with the international law, which is the Single Convention on Narcotic Drugs. Because part of that actually says cannabis is to be made available for medical use. So, you know, we shouldn't be having such a battle getting the only medicine that works for us. It shouldn't be such a battle, but it really is a struggle for a lot of people. People use cannabis for stress, all right? But if you make it illegal, you're giving them more stress, so they're more likely to use more. If you make it say, well, it's legal to use it, then it actually reduces the stress quite a lot. Especially for a lot of people who have a lot of difficulty getting cannabis. You know, especially old people. A lot of the people in Green Cross are old, elderly people, and you know, especially elderly ladies and stuff like that. They just can't go trucking off down to the local gang house and teddy house and get some cannabis. A lot of them can't even walk. So they have a real struggle. You know, and these are the people that, you know, medicinal cannabis, it shouldn't be a problem for them. We're in a desperate situation. This is the only medicine that works for us.
Somebody said to me when I got sick, try this. And I said to them, oh, what a crock, you know. Well, lo and behold, it was no crock. It turned my life around. I have cannabis, I function. I can be an active part of the community. And that's all I want. I want my independence for as long as humanly possible. That's all I want with this sickness. I hate being treated like I'm a criminal. Get out there and get these people that are beating children to death. I'm doing nothing wrong. What I do in my own home, it's my business. I don't deal drugs. I don't give it to children. I do it in the privacy of my home. And that's all I do. New Zealand's got to wake up, pull their head out of the sand. This is how it is. Why the hell should we have to keep hiding what we do? I'm not hurting anybody, but they're quite prepared to hurt me. We should be looked after and not treated like this and made to feel, basically, that we're no better than a methamphetamine cook.
The gaining of a conviction is the most harmful thing that we do on the whole to people who use it. It's time to concentrate on that part of the debate and say, why are we persisting with this law that does not deter people? Why are we persisting with this law that only criminalises people? Why are we persisting with this law that is held in wide disregard? Why are we bothering? Why are we spending all this money on the police to enforce a law that is widely disregarded and which serves no useful purpose?
Very frustrating. Yeah. It's, it put a huge amount of strain on my life, which is already stressed to the max anyway, and then they just dump a whole lot more on me. We're being victimised more than people that are really doing a lot of harm to the society. It's upside down. It's madness.
This is my monitor for while I'm on home detention. I've got a year sentence of home detention for cannabis-related charges. The whole thing is so ridiculous. I consider cannabis to be a medicine. I consider the law to be out of step. I think it's out of step with the general public now. And a lot of the medical fraternity are wanting cannabis to be included in their range of what they are able to offer to people or recommend to people. We used to have it legal here. Cannabis was legal here. My mother used it. My sister used it. My sister used it illegally as a pain relief, but they were both registered nurses and they both believed in it as needing to be available. In my own history, cannabis has been used in our family and it has been available and legal. It's only recently been illegal. So we need to look at what other countries are doing in order to establish a model and then, tweak it and modify it as you go along, as you need to with regulations of this kind. And that it should be considered a health issue rather than anything to do with the police. The police should be right out of it. Currently, I'm on pain relief that I don't agree with, I don't like, it's extremely dangerous, and I believe that I have been punished very severely for something that should not be being regarded in this way.
If the government had their way, I'd be off my dial, I'd be in a home, dribbling on a morphine drip. I have found what works, and by God, I'm going to use it.
People that need cannabis as a medicine should have it as a medicine.
The message to the community is look into your hearts and see if you can think of a reason why somebody should be sent to jail for using a plant as a medicine. If you can think of a reason, then please let me know, because I can't find anybody who's willing to have that conversation in public.
And this is what's sort of happening in the States. There's huge amounts of medical users over in the States now, and and all the time there's more states in America are changing across to medical users. It's just a logical way to go. Their government will do it eventually, but look at the harm that's going to be done while they drag their ass.
Today, doctors around the world are asking for the right to use cannabis, especially in the treatment of cancer, AIDS and pain.
I feel very angry that the current cannabis laws have this perverse effect of denying access of medicinal cannabis to people who need it. I think it's cruel, it's unnecessary. I think it's probably one of the most reprehensible consequences of this criminalising cannabis.
If people get genuine relief from using cannabis, from serious pain or serious suffering from something like chemotherapy, to say that they're not allowed it is cruel.
Dr. Lester Grinspoon, Professor Emeritus of Psychiatry at the Harvard School of Medicine, has studied cannabis longer than any other researcher. He described cannabis as a remarkably non-toxic substance with a low propensity for addiction, noting that it is impossible to overdose on cannabis.
There are no deaths from cannabis use. Anywhere. You can't find one.
There has never in medical history been a recorded death as a result of cannabis overdose, or even a death by disease conclusively attributed to cannabis. To put that in perspective, 200,000 people in the world die every year from pharmaceutical medicines. Professor Grinspoon is himself a medical cannabis user. When he provided cannabis to alleviate the suffering of his own son, dying of cancer, he committed a felony. Here in New Zealand, a provision exists in the Misuse of Drugs Act for patients to obtain permission to use cannabis from the Minister of Health. In 3.5 decades, the number of patients who have received this permission is 0.
In all these years, no one's managed to get permission from the Minister of Health. 30, 40 years or however long we've had prohibition, no one's managed to get it. So, what does that say to you? It, basically says that we're dealing with the corrupt government that is actually not looking after the people that they're meant to be looking after. They're not even complying with their own laws. The mere fact that they've got it written in the law that if you get permission, you need to get permission from the Minister for Health. The mere fact that it's written there must mean that you can get it, but you can't get it. It's upside down. It's madness.
Access to medicine is a fundamental human right. How do such policies represent the humanitarian progressive values of New Zealand? How much longer will patients be denied access to desperately needed medicine? How many more suffering New Zealanders must die or be imprisoned before the government ends this war on its most vulnerable citizens? Cannabis is not only a medicine, it is a medicine that has been in the service of humankind longer than any other medicine, and is one of the safest medicines in the collected pharmacopoeias. Yet it remains entirely prohibited, except for the 4 patients who have received permission from the Minister of Health to use Sativex, an expensive spray almost impossible to obtain under the current regime. Rather than offering tens of thousands of stricken New Zealanders a legal avenue to use badly needed cannabis, the government is offering them prison sentences. Timaru cancer patient Peter Davey is the latest victim of this vicious system, which has existed since 1927, the year after Mother Mary Joseph Albert died. In 2004, the Vatican began the beatification of Mother Mary. She will be New Zealand's first saint. The Evening Post reported in 1892 that Albert's remedies were the chief proprietary medicine of New Zealand. If Mother Mary were alive today, she'd be serving 14 years.